Every one of our clients will own at least 5 investment properties.
And it's our mission to show you how. My name's Frank Ambezi.
And I'm Adrian Trimboli, and welcome to the Investing You podcast. Episode 48. That work? Yeah. Bang, we're live. Hello, Frank.
Hello, welcome.
To the viewer, what we're going through today, how to analyse any property in under 20 minutes. How to analyse a property in under 20 minutes. Every single time that we bring out an episode, we always try to give maximum value to the viewer. This one, they are going to understand by the end of it, that is my goal, that's what I'm going to hope to get out of your brain, how they can analyse any property under 20 minutes. And I'm going to be hard on the 20 minutes, okay? Can you get that to me?
Let's do it.
All right, let's rock and roll.
Okay.
Give it to me under 20 minutes or at least the first couple of steps. Let's just start there. I think that's going to be the best way to do it. The first couple of steps to work out whether a property is a winner or a loser.
Okay. So I'm assuming that we've got the research down pat. We know where we're investing. Now we're in the location we're going to buy a property. Okay. So when you're looking on realestate.com or finding off market deals, if I get presented a property, first thing I do, of course, I'll look up it online. I do a overview of the street and I go on Google Maps. The reason why, I just want to see where the property is located. You can do a bunch of other things prior, checking insurances, checking the rental income and getting all this information from the agent. Mm-hmm. But if the property is situated where it's next to a river, okay, or it's next to a freeway, or it's next to a train line, then, if you don't look at these things first, you've just wasted all this time. So quickly doing a bird's eye view, Google Maps, have a look what's going on, have a look where the property is situated, make sure the property's not on a, depending on the purpose of the property, mm-hmm. You don't want a property where, the block, it's built on a real slopey block.
Yep.
Or, you don't want it to, just be in a location where it's, maybe backs onto a park, because backing onto a park can lead to, sometimes you might think it's a good property, but there's more robberies.
Okay.
So properties, backed onto a park.
Take your property, for example,
rental. Yep. So, these are things that you just got to be cautious of. So doing a bird's eye view on Google Maps, which is step number 1.
Yep. Awesome. Love it. Okay. Just to your point, for the viewer, again, if you're still at the point, I don't know the research, go back 2 episodes. Frank broke down the research, exactly how to do that. So if you haven't already done that, go back 2 episodes, pause this, go back there. Okay, so first things first, location, where the property is situated, whatnot.
Yep.
What's next?
So from there, I like to have a look at the property itself physically. Okay, so if you've got a walkthrough from the agent, or you're organising a walkthrough to walk through it yourself, or even looking at realestate.com or CoreLogic videos or photos, I should say, you can see what the property looks like. Now have a look. Sometimes you can have a look in the corner of the property, in the cornices, they might have cracking. Yep. You can have a look at maybe if the carpet's starting to, frazzle up and it's starting to lose its stickiness to the surface of the floorboards or whatever it may be there. You might need to do the carpets, or, the paint or the curtains may look a bit shonky. So having a look and doing a visual inspection or looking at photos is going to quickly determine, okay, what's the quality and what this property needs. Because if you're someone that is capped at your budget and you don't want to spend money on a renovation right now because you've got a limited, purchase price and a limited, amount of funds, then that's going to determine, okay, is this property suited for me?
Yep. As opposed to going something clean.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Gotcha. So location first, actual asset next. What comes after that?
After that, I like to...
And how long are we at right now? How long has this taken you to do these first 2 steps?
It should only take you 5, not even a couple minutes.
Okay.
Couple minutes.
Cool.
Okay. If you're someone that's new to it, okay, and it's your first time, then of course it's always going to take you that little bit more longer. Okay. Because you're over analysing, you're making sure if it's going to be the right one, if it's your first property.
Gotcha.
From there, we use a program to identify, is this property in a good pocket of this suburb? Okay. And the things that I look at, number 1 is how many renters in that pocket.
Yep.
We can find out how many renters in the suburb on abs.com or using other programs that you can get that information. So for example, Coburg, let's just say there's 40% of renters and let's say there's 60% of owner occupiers. Fantastic. But We want to know in certain pockets, okay, how many renters and owner occupiers are in those pockets or in those streets. Because if there's more owner occupiers, they're going to push up property prices. So that's number one.
Yep.
So you want a low level of renters, 40% or lower in that street. Number two, you want a high level of owned outright levels. Once again, you can check the owned outright levels, meaning how many of those houses don't have a mortgage.
Yep.
We can check that from a suburb level. Once again, you want it from street level. Why? Because it just shows that there's more desirability in those pockets and of those streets. And then, of course, there's more owner occupiers and they look after their properties.
Yep.
Okay. With that as well, number three of that part is I want to make sure that the affordability and the income levels are very strong in that area, in that pocket.
Love it.
There's always certain pockets in the same suburb that people earn a little bit more money and the houses are much nicer, okay, compared to, going down to the other end, they can earn a lot less money and the houses can't be as nice. So that's something to look out for as well. Last one I like to look at is public housing, okay?
Big one.
We all know, once again, I grew up in Coburg in Victoria. There's parts of Coburg where there's high public housing and there's parts of Coburg where there isn't. You don't want to be buying in a high public housing zone, okay? Because one, there's going to be more renters. Two, there's going to be low income levels. And three, of course, the government housing, they don't put money into those properties. And so the medium house price is a lot cheaper in those areas. And that's, it can stunt your growth and your rental growth.
Yep.
Okay.
Gotcha. So that's the four. You said at the start there's a program. What's the program?
Microburbs.
Microburbs. Awesome.
Okay. And you can, I think they got a free subscription, but we pay for the paid version.
Yep.
Because you do get more information and more data that is more precise.
Okay.
To that granular level.
Awesome. Again, how quick is that job there to look at those 4 points?
Once you know what you're looking at for and you're putting in the address, honestly, it'll take me a minute because I'm just looking at it and it brings it all down for me and I'm just, checking it all and making sure it's all nice and quick and easy to look at once you understand how that program works.
Yep. Love it. So we're at 9 minutes now. Got 5 minutes for the first. Well, sorry, no, way less than 9 minutes. We're at 6 minutes. And again, to the viewer, I told you this was going to be a very, very good podcast because you're breaking it all down. So we've got location, the first one. That's simple. Is it next to a park? Is it next to this? Is it next to that? We've then got the asset itself, looking into that asset, whether you do it through an RE agent or whether you do it through property manager, do it yourself. And then you've got, the pockets of that suburb. What comes after that?
So if you're in an area where there has been flooding before, like say at Townsville, Shepparton in Victoria, you want to go now and look at the interactive mapping tool, which is a tool that is from the council that they supply for free. Yep. And so you just put the local council district in. So for example, Shepparton mapping tool or interactive mapping tool. And you want to be looking at a few things. Number one, flooding. Okay, is this property in a flood zone or flood overlay? Number two, bushfire zone. So it's not a bushfire zone where, if it is, your premium for your insurances will be pretty expensive. Number three is flight path or,
Flight path zone, yep.
So making sure if you're buying in an area like Shepparton doesn't really have too many domestic flights coming in. Like if it's a Townsville or if it's, like a Rockhampton or a big regional town, there's a lot of planes coming in and out. So you don't want to be buying a property where the flight path and you've got this big plane, humming across your backyard and doing and you hear that noise. You don't want that.
Yep.
Number four, you don't want a noise corridor.
Yep.
So if the property is located where it is and there's a main freeway or road or train line, you can look up if there's going to be decibels of noise coming in to that property. And so that will affect your growth and your rental growth as well, capital growth and rental growth with the noise corridor. So you got to watch out. I remember we're looking at a property for a client back in the day in Rockhampton. It was probably like 2 streets away from the train line. And I remember when I went on a noise corridor, it was in the noise corridor. And I remember the agent, I go to him, can you do a video and just film when the train's going by? And he did, and you could hear it from the house. Like it was pretty loud. And I said, okay, if that's from the video, imagine being there. So I said, no, we just canned the property.
Didn't purchase a property.
No.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then
I like that.
Sewage lines, okay, or infrastructure, they call it infrastructure, council infrastructure. So sewage lines, water lines and stuff like that, making sure there's none of that running through the property or easements. Because if you want to develop on the block and you've got an easement running through the middle of the backyard, you can't build on top of that. So they're things you got to check. There's little things like, checking the zoning as well. So is it low density, medium density, high density? If it's a high density, that means you can build on it and build, two-story properties and multiple properties.
Yep.
And just checking those. Every council is a little bit different. Some have general neighborhood zoning or, general zoning. So like they all got different names for their zonings, but just checking that, because if your purpose is to develop on it or put a granny flat or do something to it, making sure it's in the right zoning is important for yourself.
Gotcha. Love it.
Okay.
I love it. There's a few things there that people, obviously bushfire zones, flood zones, everyone thinks about that. It's the other things, and it's very common sense, noise corridor, flight path, like the sewage lines, the zoning. Those are the things that people, I think, forget about. I think that's the thing there that, that kind of makes or breaks an asset, right? Especially if you're buying interstate. Obviously, if you go there, you're probably going to realize that. Where can we find this information? The decibel stuff. How do I find that?
Like the noise corridors and everything.
Yeah.
So when you're on that mapping tool, if it comes up in a noise corridor, you'll see there'll be like a purple line, and it'll be this purple line running through the properties, and every property that touches that purple line, it'll have a scale there, and it'll be like, if it's light purple, X amount of decibels. If it's dark purple, it's higher decibels. So there's a graph, there's a legend for all these things that we've just spoken about when you're using that interactive mapping tool, and it will tell you the degree of the flood zone or the bushfire zone, the noise corridor.
And where's this interactive mapping tool? Where can I find
local count? All the council areas that you're looking for your properties. If it's Moreland Council, Shepparton Council, Townsville Council, they got their own tools.
Okay.
So you just go on their website.
So it'll be different for each council, each LGA will be different.
Victoria have their own mapping tool that does all Victoria, which is great. But in Queensland, each individual council has their own tool.
Okay, so you actually got to go in there, and then that's how you find out those things. Perfect. That's 4 bangers. What are we at? How long minute-wise does that take?
So at this point now, I still want to do a few more checks. One of the other checks I'll start to do is I'd like to check the insurances. How many times we've looked at a property, it's not in a flood zone, not in a bushfire zone. We check the premium, and the premium's through the roof. It can be like $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 for insurance. And you can call the insurances and ask why and shop around and get as many quotes as you can. But if it's so expensive and it's going to smash your cash flow, we'll just walk away from the property. Okay. And now with these steps that we've talked about as well, sometimes in certain areas, I'll do certain checks first. Like for instance, if it's Townsville or if it's, place in Shepparton, I'm going to be looking at the flood zone probably at the very beginning kind of, because I might look on the map and be, okay, it's nowhere near the river. And it might not be, I'll already do my checks of the bird's eye view of Google. Okay, that's sweet, but I'm going to quickly check the flood map because, it's flooded there before, and we just want to make sure quickly we're not wasting too much time.
Gotcha.
So some of these things, like every region has certain risks.
Yep.
And just checking those risks probably at the beginning and not doing all the work, and then you check the last risk at the end of the flood zone.
Yeah.
And you put all these, minutes in, and you've wasted your time.
That's if it's in a high danger zone. If you're talking it's in
I wouldn't say high danger zone, but it's had some sort of natural disaster or some sort of some sort of effect that's happened there before in the past.
You're not going to do that if it's CBD of Melbourne or something.
Well, yeah, there's certain parts of the CBD, like I know where in Coburg, if you're near the creek, at the Moreland Creek there's places that have flooded before.
Maribyrnong, another place.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. So the fifth thing is insurance. Again, that's just getting an insurance quote. That's a 3-minute job, right?
Yeah, a couple-minute job. Like just get a couple premiums, check it out. Okay, cheap premiums. Look, some states are more expensive, like Queensland, $2,500 you get insurances for. If it's less than $2,000, you're doing well. Sometimes you can get for $1,500. Great. But yeah, if it's through the roof, it's like $3, $4, $5 grand, $10,000 for insurance. Just walk away from the property.
Yep.
And work out why. Have a chat with them.
Yep.
Have a chat with the insurer if you want to just make sure what's going on. Why is it so expensive?
Because you get a better understanding of the region.
Yeah, you need to understand what's going on.
Cool. Love it. We're at 12 minutes. What else to actually identify whether or not the property's a winner or a loser?
Well, from here, I like to, you can do a couple of due diligence, and other things that I like to do is I like to get, of course, all the information. So rental appraisal, I like to understand that, the rates and get all the information for the utilities.
Yep.
And then I do a cash flow analysis and see what this property is yielding as well.
Yep.
Okay, so just doing that quick DD, you know how much the property is going to cost you to hold, or if it's going to put money in your pocket.
Yep.
And just doing that, we've got a spreadsheet that we do that with for every client we present a property. They know what the property is going to cost them.
Of course.
I think it's quite important that people understand when you're buying a property, if it's going to, financially make sense for you as well, or if it's going to be put you, in the red, because some people might go, it might cost them too much to hold per month, and they can't afford that property.
Gotcha. So that's literally finding out just those last things, the rates, utilities, and then putting all that information into a cash flow calculator.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a rental appraisal. Does a rental appraisal come into this cash flow part?
So rental appraisal, yeah, you'll get that from the agent, or they might have it online. Just get that information and then chuck that into the spreadsheet just to show you how much the property's costing you.
Can we get that spreadsheet to the viewers?
We definitely can get that to the viewers.
Beautiful.
Okay,
If we could
and
put
that will
in the
definitely
notes.
help for people looking at certain properties to quickly do an analysis. It's even good to do analysis of comparing what a 3% rental yield looks like, a 4% rental yield, and a 5% or even a 6%. And because if you look at certain states, it's very hard, and you're not going to get a 6% rental yield in Melbourne or in Sydney.
No.
Okay, especially for a house, definitely it's well out of the equation. But you might be able to get maybe a 4%, for a house, depending on the purchase price.
Yep.
Okay, and just understanding, how what that all looks like, because that's going to show you, okay, well, if I buy a property with a 3% rental yield, okay, it's going to cost me 20. I'm just plucking numbers out of the air here. 25 grand a year. If I get a 4%, it's going to cost me 15 grand. If I get if I get a 5%, it's going to cost me 10 grand.
Yep.
I'm just throwing numbers out there.
But it's kind of on point, right? It's not too far from the actual truth.
Yeah, so it's just to understand what rental yield you need to look at before even going out there and looking at properties, because you might be looking at, I want to get into Melbourne right now. Fantastic. You might have to spend 700. The 700K properties, the rental yields might be in the threes. And so I think I'm going a bit off topic of checking properties, but I think it's good for the listener here to check what sort of purchase price they need to go in at. And that should be part of your plan and your strategy prior.
Prior to.
Yeah, but it's always good to use a cash flow calculator to understand the difference here.
Yep, for sure. Okay, so that actually would come prior to even the property. That's
Yeah.
strategy. What are we looking at?
Yeah.
What do we need to get? Obviously, that's from a finance perspective. What yield do we need to achieve to get into the next asset? Cool. Okay, awesome. That's 5. I'd imagine that cash flow calculator will take a fair bit of time to put together, or no? Obviously,
Not
for
really.
your
No,
guys,
you put your price in of what you're going to purchase the property. You put your interest rate. You put the amount of deposit. If it's a 10%, 20% deposit, the rent in of how much it is per week, $500. Put it in, and then you just put your utilities, your rates, your water levy fees, your PM fees, insurances, and then it'll tell you exactly. It'll calculate it all for you. Of hey, this is what the property's going to cost you, or put in your pocket.
5-minute job. We're at 17 minutes.
Yeah.
We're almost at that.
So in 20 minutes, you can literally analyze a property even quicker, I reckon.
That's it. We're done. There's no more.
That's it.
Beautiful.
No more. You're there, and you can look at a property and say yes or no. Okay.
Amazing. I
And
love
some
it.
of those steps, you might look at the first step and say, hey, this property looks really, really nice. And it can be nice for a reason and cheap for a reason. For instance, I think me and Aussie were looking at this property in Victoria, and
Who's Aussie?
Austin, our buyer's agent, call him Aussie. And I go, Aussie, how come this property's so cheap? And he goes, look at the condition. We're looking at other properties in that area, $50,000 to $100,000 more for the same condition of the property. And we're like, okay, we're going to have a look at this. So we had a look, deep dive. It looked like it was all right on the bird's eye view. Quickly went into the flood map zone, in a flood zone. That's why the property was so cheap. It was 100 grand cheaper than what other houses would look like in the same condition.
Yep.
And that property's been on the market for a very, very long time. So these are things to look out for. When you see cheap properties, they're cheap for a reason as well. If they're in really good condition in these areas too.
Yep.
There's an issue there. So that should even be a red flag when you're quickly looking at a property as well. And the condition of the property is really, really pristine, and it's really affordable or a lot cheaper than other properties in that suburb.
Why?
Yeah, why? Ask that question, why? And I forgot to mention, even here, these are you doing checks. I like to even, ask now interview of course, the real estate agent.
Of course.
So probably we missed out on a step there, but, asking a lot of questions. What's the motivation of why is the vendor selling, and understanding what's going on, asking, what's going to take to buy the property, and doing a bit of a negotiation prior to even buying to see where that sits, and just getting as much information, how long the property's been on the market for, what's been some of the feedback that you've got from the, some of the other people that have looked at the property.
Yep.
And that they're asking the right questions to the agent is going to help you, as well by building rapport with the agent, but as well, getting a little bit more info about that property.
which I think we'll do a whole nother episode. Just
Yeah,
on
which
the
I think
negotiation side.
negotiation and talking to the agent, how to speak to the agent is probably the most important part, because if you don't, that can save you, tens of thousands of dollars in negotiating. Not just that, if you're someone that wants to buy multiple properties in that area, of course, that's going to play a big part of building that relationship.
Of course. Used to go through my mind when I was buying property, is there's always a rush, right? When you find a property and you're like, I need to go, I need to move. If it is a rush, and if the agent's playing ball and being like, listen, we've got 5 offers, I'm presenting the offers to the client tomorrow, you're going to have to do your DD, you're going to have to do it and put in an offer in the next hour. It may take an hour for someone to do this for their first time, right? It may take multiple hours. Would you compromise on any of these 5 points here?
No, I wouldn't, because if you buy, we've had one of our clients, Marcus, I think he bought a property in Echuca.
Good market.
Or the property done well during COVID, and then it's really slowed down. So he bought it for like 300, went to 450. And then for the last 2-3 years, it's really done nothing. It's kind of just trended sideways. It's plateaued the market. The rents have gone up, but he bought the property not knowing, in a flood zone. And so when you buy property in a flood zone, it's really, you're praying for, if it hasn't flooded in the past, but it's in a flood zone, you're just praying for it not to flood. But if it has flooded in the past, okay, and you buy that property and you don't do your checks, you might buy the property and the insurance can be $7,000. I got a client who has a property in Maryborough in Queensland, bought a property, didn't do the checks, and I go, how come your insurance is $6,000?
It's crazy.
And he doesn't know, okay, but there is something wrong with that property in that area. Now, I didn't deep dive into it because I was doing a cash flow analysis on this property recently. But when I look at $6,000 for insurance just for a freestanding house that he paid $340,000 for, there's questions there. I start to ask her, why has this happened? So don't do that, because once that property floods, literally you're going to lose 50% of the value of that property.
Yep.
Okay. And so that's quite important. Don't rush it, because you're literally spending hundreds of thousands of dollars getting a mortgage from a bank. If something goes wrong with that property, it's not like you can sell it quickly overnight. If it floods or something happens, it can take a very long time to sell that property.
Gotcha. Okay. So, but if you could knock off any of these, just if we're in a rush, can we knock off the cash flow? Can we knock off obviously the insurance? No. The zonings? No.
Zonings, no. Interactive mapping tool there. You need to do those checks. You need to, I think, understanding where the property is in that, if it's in high public housing and high level renters or low level renters, that's quite important too, because this is where a good property will stand out in the worst of times. Okay, so let's say we buy a property today and let's fast forward 5 years, go down the track. The property's done really well. Let's just say it's doubled in value. Fantastic. Let's say the rental market starts to soften. And you bought this property and you didn't do any checks, and it's in a high level of renters and high public housing. It's grown. Fantastic. But what will happen is, let's just say now there's going to be more rental properties coming on the market. Rental market starts to soften. Rental prices start to slow down. There's no growth. It can maybe go backwards a little bit or just stay the same. And there's an oversupply of properties on the market for rent. The good properties in the good areas for rent, and there's not many properties in those areas that come up for rent because there's low level of rental properties in that area, in that suburb of that pocket, they will rent out easier in a downturning market. Okay. And so you've got to watch out. I remember looking at a property in Rockhampton. Remember that duplex I found, $275,000.
I do.
Got presented by a agent in Rockhampton, $275,000 renting out for $500 a week in rent. This is back in 2022. Sue calls me up, Frank, I've got this cracking property. Awesome. Have a look at this property. Okay, why is it so cheap? At the time, we're buying like duplexes for $350, $380. It's across a road from the industrial estate. There's a big, massive, trucking yard with all these trucks and stuff there. And there's all these factories, down that road, down that street. So it's in an industrial area, but this house was in there. The house will grow. The rental market will grow during this market right now because Rockhampton has done really well. But when the market turns around and you've got so many properties on the market for rent, you can pick and choose where you want to rent because the market's flat. And you probably don't want to be living across from a trucking yard or all these factories. You want to be living close to the schools, close to the shopping centers, close to certain amenities. So you got to forward think about these properties that you're buying. Okay, when the market turns, you got to make sure the property at least is in a really good pocket of that suburb.
Is there any world though that you would still buy that asset and then plan to sell?
You could have the vision of saying, I'm going to hold this property for 4 or 5 years, sell it. Okay. Just hope the God, you can sell it and get the return that you want and get what you want from it. But for me, I guess it's depending on the level of risk that you want to take.
Yep. Still, I mean, I'm sure that rent and that property now would be doubled. Let's say 2022.
I wouldn't say the rent has doubled, but the rent might be $600, maybe close to 700, maybe. The value of the property might be maybe 500. I don't know. I got to go back and have a look at it. But I remember another buyer's agent buying that and putting it on their socials, and I remember giving it the flick. I was like, I wouldn't personally buy it, and I could have bought it, but I didn't want to give it to my client because then what would happen if they hold that property and 5-6 years go down the track?
Yep. Okay. So all important. In other words, no, you cannot stuff around with these 5 points, and if you can do it under 20 minutes, there should be no reason why you should not do any of them.
Yeah, you see people buy properties on the back of a train line, and eventually down the track they develop and put blocks of units on there and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's great, but like I guess as well, in a high demand market and stuff like that, you'll sell them. But as well, who would want to live next to want to live next to a train line? And regardless, if you might be able to get that property for an extra 50 grand or 100 grand cheaper, but is it really worth it? The 50 or 100 grand cheaper, is it really worth it in the long run?
Depending. I mean, if you got your investment hat on, probably not, right? I love it. Okay, awesome. We're going to go back to smash or pass, and then I think we're done. But I mean, that's 20 minutes that it's taken you to run through the 20-minute analysis. I think you've done an excellent job. The famous smash or pass. If you're a viewer who watches every episode, you'll know that every episode I give one region to Frank. This week, it is going to be... We haven't done this. We're going to go Perth.
I pass.
You pass? Okay.
I pass.
That's interesting.
Perth,
Tell me why.
Perth has done really well.
Exceptionally well.
And I think it's grown about 80% in the last 5 years.
Magnificent.
So that's from a whole city area when you're looking at it. Some markets have probably gone over 100% in growth in the space of 5 years. Some may even more. I know you've got a property in Rockingham there.
Rockingham.
And
that hasn't done that much. It's done 40, 50%.
I know there's clients when we're buying in Armadale, we're paying $350 for some of those properties, and one of our clients sold their property for $550, and they paid $350 for $340. They paid for it.
That's amazing.
So, and they sold their property start of last year. So I wonder what that property will be worth now. But there's certain areas, and depending on when you got into that market, 80%, 40%, 50%, 100% growth. And so you don't want to be buying in a market that's already had that much growth.
Of course.
There's been a lot of hype. I look at a market where if you're buying in a market and there's no negotiation and people are there's 20 offers on a property and the property's going 50, 100 grand or more over the asking price, you're too late to the party.
Yep.
Okay. And Perth's had that. And so Perth's done really well. It's a great state. It's paying off its debt. And in the last 12 months, it's been paying off its, debt, which is, I think it's the only state to pay off its debt.
Right.
From, borrowing money from the government and then paying that back, which is fantastic.
Yep.
It's doing quite well, but you've missed the boat on that. And I actually it's quite funny. My fiance is Gumari. If you're Italian, you know what a Gumari is. It's like a godmother.
Yeah.
Reached out to me and she said, they live in south of Perth and they want to buy a property for their daughter. And they go, have we missed the boat? We know it's done so well. It's doubled in value. The price is here. But, we don't want to buy and then the market slows down. And I was having a chat and going through a bit of information with her. And I said, look, you have missed the boat because it's grown and it's doubled in value and they've seen it. But you don't want to be, if you're looking from a wealth creation, you don't want to be buying in that market.
Of course.
You want to be buying where when we're buying in there, 2021, 2022, we're buying in there. Mm-hmm. We're picking up properties from 350, 450, around that price. And some of those clients' properties now worth 700 plus.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I don't think I can argue with that. Is there more juice? Is there more growth to come in the Perth market?
There is. Yep. There is more to come. It is starting to show signs of softening. Like it's not as aggressive like it was 2 years ago and in the last 12 to 18 months.
Yep.
But you will eventually get towards that, the top, and it'll start to slow down because it's not sustainable.
Where do you see the top for Perth? Just Perth.
Look, I think at the medium house price at the moment, I think it's around that high sevens.
Okay.
That's for the whole of Perth, but I think it might get towards the 850. It might start to slow down. it's quite interesting market because things have changed. I know you hear a lot of stories of where Perth done really well in the early 2000s and then
Dropped off.
the mining boom 2011, 2012. Then the market done really, really bad and went backwards in value. And you could buy a property back then for like $300,000, $400,000 in Perth. And so, and then now it's taken off again. But since that time, the government have changed a lot of things and try to strengthen the economy. So I don't see it going backwards like it did back in the past. I think it's changed and they're changing the resiliency of the industries in that area.
Yep.
And so I do think if the rates start to come down towards the end of this year and next year, I think you might see a bit more growth to come because people will still want to get into that market. Because if you look, there's still high population growth. There's still people moving there. There is low listing of property sales. So that might as well fuel people and help people to get into the market that can afford to buy more property because now the rates have gone down and increases their borrowing capacity.
In the Perth market, you're saying?
In Perth market and this in general, I think in the economy.
Okay. But you're not buying there, obviously. I know that.
No.
We haven't bought there for 12 months, give or take.
Maybe more, I think. 18 months.
18 months.
In Perth, we haven't bought for, probably 18 months, nearly close to 2 years.
There you go. So way too hot. That's why the pass is. I think we're done. That was a good session. 20 minutes. We went over the 5 points. You run over those 5 points as the viewer. You really shouldn't miss a beat, depending on how diligent you are and how patient you are. I don't know if it's going to take less than 20 minutes for your first time, but if you've done it 5, 10, 15 times, it definitely will be less than 20.
Well, you practice. If you listen to this right now and you're saying, hey, this is awesome, never heard this stuff before, just get a property in your own backyard and start playing around with it.
Yep.
Start playing around with it because then when you are in the market looking, then you can quickly do it and do that check if you've got a property and you've only got a day to put an offer in and you found this property today, bang, you can do it in 20 minutes and it won't take you maybe an hour or two and you need to, quickly move on that property.
I love it. And for the viewers, again, if you want that cash flow calculator, it'll be somewhere in the notes. I don't know how we'll do it. And
I think just reach out and we'll if you listen to this, reach out and we'll have a link there and we can send that across.
Yeah, I think we can do it without and them even reaching out. But regardless, it'll be there for you. Again, another banger. Thank you for taking and running with this podcast. I'm just the interviewer and see you next week.
See you then.
Bye-bye.